Hi, and welcome to Talking Wildfire with Michael Hill. Today we're talking with Rod Dow, and we're going to be talking about the Ram Air parachute. When I trained as a smoke jumper, I was trained under a round parachute. And in Russia, they train on rounds and squares. But recently, with the Forest Service and the BLM, we've all gone square. And Rod, can you tell us a little bit about how it began and the ideas behind it and the making of it?
Yeah, it happened back in what we call the T hangar days. We were operating out of Lend-Lease building from World War II when they were sending the planes over to Russia for 4 years. Well, they were there from a year before I got there, and so for 4 years, 74 through 77. And I got to start this with a little bit of a disclaimer because I never was a loft guy. And so um, any kind of technical thing about the ram airs and the switch over, you'd have to talk to somebody else. There's five or six, seven of them that were involved. But approximately, I've talked quite a bit to those guys, and went through the early training, and so I'm not completely out on a limb here. They began to, and I say they, mostly started with Ron Lott. He was at that time the loft assistant and then became the loft foreman. And he started talking about ram air parachutes. He was a skydiver in his own time on his in his weekend days, and um, and they took the idea to Al Dutton, who was our boss, Big Al, we called him. He's passed on now, but he was probably the best boss I ever had. He was extremely clear thinker, and he was great at government bureaucracy. And he told them, uh, here's the deal. And he's basically talking to two or three guys at that time. Jim Veach, who's a former CIA guy, a real clear thinker, uh, and um, and he wanted to go together with Lundo and work toward the ram air. So the two of them and Matt Kelly were talking to Al, the boss, and Al said, "Okay, um, no problem. We'll give it a try. But here's the deal: you can't just send an idea to Washington D.C. It's not going to work. They're going to look at it and we're going to be asking for $1 million worth of equipment and they're going to say no. So what you need to do is send them a finished product. Um, get the whole thing done on training money and send them something that already looks like, oh, this has already been developed, and even jump a couple fires on it. You send them a finished product, you got a chance. But here's the problem. I'm still talking as Al. You have to do a lot of jumps, obviously, to get an entire base transferred over to a brand new complete system. And that's whatever, 10 jumps apiece, and we got 80 guys. I cannot afford on training money to have 10 jumps apiece for 80 guys. That's way too much aircraft time, fuel, the contract, etc. And so you got to come up with some other way to do it. And they said, well, we've got an idea. And they came up with what we call the Parascension program. And what it was they went to the metal shop, the BLM metal shop, and had a 10 by 10, I'm guessing, whatever, 10 feet by 10 feet uh, platform on wheels, a cart, basically, with a steering thing down the middle of it. There's a guy sitting in the middle, and he's got a steering wheel, and he's got a cage over it. the whole thing was kind of silly looking. And then you've got a guy that's in charge. What do we call him? The launch master, I think we called him. He's in charge of the whole thing, and the cart is attached by a 1,500-foot rope to a pickup. This is all on the ramp in front of the jumper shack. By that time we had moved out of the T hangar or in what we call now the old shack, and it was right on the ramp.
Why was it important to go to a square? Why?
Good question.
Yeah.
Mostly it was Lundo saying all canopies are moving in this direction, and we have the perfect situation because we jump in tundra. So it's easier for us to transition into a new system because it will work very well in Alaska. We don't jump big timber, and so during a transition time, you can do it in Alaska, and we've got the perfect situation with Al Dunton running the bureaucracy part of it, and we're in a good situation to do it here. I don't think there was any real demand to do it because in Alaska tundra the rounds work very well also. Unfortunately, they don't take much wind, and the ram airs do. So one big advantage to the ram airs was more wind capable out on the tundra. And I've never talked to Lundo about any more specifics, but I think those things undoubtedly were part of the equation. The ram airs were being developed in the skydiving world, and Lundo saw that it was going to be something for the future, and we had the perfect situation with Al, and so it was time for them to do it, and I'm pretty sure that's what started it, and then having Veach there just purely by good luck, because he's such a clear thinker, that helped too. They came up with this cart, and they had this launch master who is in charge of when the launch happens. You're behind a truck, 1,500 feet, and the canopy had two, maybe 1.5-inch grommets in the front corners, and then there were two guys with these big poles with metal tits sticking out the ends, and they would lift the canopy, one on each side. And so you're standing there with a cart and a fully dressed smoke jumper and a canopy that's overhead. He is also attached by 4 hard points. Now, maybe I'm sure you know what I mean by a hard point, a floor ring or whatever. Picture a ring about so big or about an inch in diameter that swivels out of the floor, and you can attach things to it, mostly for cargo and that kind of thing. But on this cart, you had 4 of those, and attachments coming from all 4 of those up to one single point, and then off of that is what's called, all modern jumpers know what this means, a 3-ring release. So without going too technical, it's 3 rings coming smaller and smaller, and they each have a mechanical advantage on the previous one. And so by the time you get to the third, it takes very, very little. You could hold it shut with your finger, and that's extremely common in modern jumper gear. And all of the jumpers now know what that means. So there's a 3-ring release on these 4 attachment points. one single release on your back. You are fully suited and shooted, so you've got a harness on and a 3-ring attachment on the back of that harness. Then there's another connection, another 3-ring going from the cart to the pickup, and a third coming from Ying off of that line to you. So there's three-ring releases. The launch master sees that the canopy is up overhead, the truck is tight to the cart, and he's on a radio. He tells the guy to start moving. He starts moving, and instantly the canopy begins to catch air, fills up, and so the launch master is making a decision. Okay, are we good? Truck is tight to the cart. Everything is working fine. The guy can steer fine, and the Y is attached to this guy, to the jumper, and he's attached to the cart. By the way, at first, the canopy is trying to pick up this 1,000-pound cart through you, right?
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so it's a very strange feeling at first. But anyway, he sees that all of this is working, and he goes, hit it. The truck mashes the gas, takes off as fast as possible, and the launch master pulls a single release, which releases 2 of those 3 rings. The one off your back, so to release you from the cart, and the one from the truck to the cart. Now there's only one left. That's from you to the truck. They hit the gas as hard as they can, and you absolutely rocket off that cart.
Wow.
And the first 200 or 300 feet were memorable, shall we say. I listened to, we had voice activated mics, which we hardly ever used. I'm not sure what that was about. But anyway, I got done with my first one, and Matt Kelly's at the other end telling you when to flare. He had these ridiculous orange paddles, big, big orange paddles on your hands, on his hands, and he would signal you when to flare the canopy for your landing. Anyway, he's at the other end, and he said, "Hey, skip your turn and listen on the mic to the next guy that's going up." And it sounded like some machine was sucking air out of the guy's lungs when he took off. And the first 200 to 300 feet. Well, see, another thing, anybody who hasn't done something like this, you got a picture, the canopy's not above you. The canopy's back behind you, at a 45-degree angle. So you're just looking at blue sky, right? And zooming off of this cart. And then at about 300, it would start to mellow out a little bit. And you had an altimeter on your wrist. And when you got to 700, you're doing this yourself. You would release that last connection. There's a handle right in front of you. Pull that, it releases that last 3-ring, and then you just practice canopy maneuvers. So every single guy, nobody seems to remember how many we did. I thought it was like 8 or 10. Other guys said, nah, 3 or 4. Nobody seems to remember, but we did several, and you did it in a group of about 12 guys, just rotating through, and for a week. That's why I thought it was more, because we did it for a whole week, and you could rotate through 12 guys a couple times in a day. So The way I remember it, we did about 10 of them. So the entire base did, let's say, 10 of these. So you got some practice with the new canopy, steering it. And then they jumped, the developers, there's about a total of maybe a dozen guys working on it. 8 of them jumped 2 fires with the new canopies, and they took the entire package, sent it to DC, and they just stamped it and sent them the money. It was one of the most amazing bureaucratic achievements that I had. Well, the most amazing bureaucratic achievement I saw in my career. I couldn't believe it that they pulled off a huge transfer over to a complete new canopy system just on their own decision, and sent it to DC and said we need $1 million, and they sent it to them, and deal was done. And then
Wow.
Alaska, meanwhile, was beginning to send jumpers down south to the Great Basin and started the Boise base. So those 2 bases were BLM, and you probably remember when only the BLM jumpers had the ram airs, and so you had mixed loads on if you traveled south. Well, either way, if guys came up north, they would jump with the rounds, and if we went south, we'd jump with the squares. And something funny right in the middle of that, you can try and picture what this looked like at a government facility. We're on a military base, government facility, and here's these guys, looks like they're out playing games or something. And my group was finished. And I was all done, and I was back out in the yard helping with the landscaping. And somebody stopped by, somebody I knew from town or from the main head shed. I can't remember who came. And we're just standing out there chit-chatting. Well, meanwhile, the next group is getting ready on the other side of the building. And I'm standing there talking to this guy. Oh, how's the wife and kids, man? What's the new job doing? You're heading down to Anchorage, and all of a sudden, out from behind the building, a jumper in a canopy, and you can't even see the rope, because it's too far away, is arcing up toward the sky. And my buddy's going, "What what is that?" And that went on all summer, except when we were jumping fires. That was 83 to, I would say it was 83, when almost everybody did the ram air training. And now there was a big controversy about whether the lower 48 was going to transfer over to ram airs. That took a long time, and they finally decided they were going to do it. They had a committee and worked on it a long time, and came up to Alaska and did some training, some of the people from each base. And then they finally switched over everything as of a year ago. I think there's one guy who decided he wasn't going to do it. He's just going to retire under rounds. I think he was up at NCSB or somewhere, college somewhere. But one other thing that is critical about them is that they're a ton of fun because you get to fly around. I jumped a fire on the oh man, what's the name of that place where you see the bears fishing all the time? They're big Kodiak looking bears, some of them, but it's on the mainland, McNeil River. We jumped a fire there, and you could fly out over the ocean. There was a big cliff, and we're landing on the other side. It was going to be easy to get there, and you could cruise out over the ocean and go back, and other times you'll get some lift, and you can just hover in the air for long as you want. Finally, just go down. It's really fun. So the controversy about whether or not they should convert over. I think the lower 48 guys were seeing how much fun we were having, and they decided we're going to do that too. And so now the transfer is all complete. Yeah, the ram airs are designed. Well, that name is significant because the front lobes of it's a square canopy, rectangle. The back end is closed, and the front end has got openings all the way along the front. The total thickness in the front is probably 3 feet, something like that, 2, 3 feet. As soon as you get a little bit of air going into that, like if you're falling and a round canopy would fill up, same thing. That front edge fills and turns the front of the canopy into the front of a wing. If you can picture, a wing has a rounded front. This does not. It's flat, square, with big square holes in it. But because you are flying forward, the name ram air not only fills the canopy, but it creates that rounded front surface with dead air. As you're going into it, it's like say it's standing still and you have a wind going toward it. Same thing. The wind stacks up in there. The air stacks up, becomes pressurized, and some of that pressurized air is spilling out the front, pushing the shape and becoming rounded. So the air flies over the top of that rounded front and creates a wing effect. Same thing that an airplane wing does. If you get air that takes longer to fly a longer distance flying over the top of a wing, you create pressure from the bottom. Actually, it's more like, yes, you could create pressure from the bottom, a vacuum on top. That's what a wing does. Same thing. A ram air creates that wing effect. So you are flying quite a bit more forward than you are with with a round parachute, which gives you about a 20-25 mile an hour forward momentum, which is quite a bit. Just if jumpers, if there's any jumpers that see this video, you can actually ask the spotter to pull you off the wind line. Now, there's not any training foremen that are going to like their rookies listen to me saying this, but this is an example. You can ask a spotter to pull you off the wind line because going across the wind with that capability, you can always get back. See, there's nothing pushing you out. You're going across the wind line, 25 miles an hour. So if you are in a situation, you probably remember times when you're doing this. You're trying to steer, but you have to be facing this way. So you're steering like this, right?
Mhm.
If you pull off the wind line, you're looking over sideways. You're not looking backwards, maybe like this. And so that just gives you an idea of the difference. The controversy from down south was how are these going to perform in tight spots? Because it's nice to have a little forward speed when you flare for the landing.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is, can you make it descend directly downward? And
Mm-hmm.
the chutes that we jumped, you had to be careful because if you push your limit, you slow the canopy down more and more and more. Eventually, you're going to stall it. And it'll all of a sudden, extremely radical fall rate. But the modern ones, I watched those guys up in AK. I went up and helped them out in Paracargo a couple times the last few years. And the new canopies, they can hold that sink for quite a while safely. And so it's a better canopy than what I jumped. Well, a round parachute, all it's doing is reducing the descent rate. Now, some of that, back in World War II, you didn't have any capability of steering at all. They began to put slots in them so that the canopy, while all it's doing is reducing your descent rate, some of that air spilled back out of the slots, and you could steer using that. Not a lot. You get the modern round parachutes, they probably get, I don't know, 7 or 8 miles an hour, the good ones. When I started on 5As, I'll bet that forward speed was probably less than 5 miles an hour. And the difference in when you have a round canopy and all you're doing is reducing that descent rate versus actually flying a wing, then you increase that forward speed, quadruple. And that is what makes the huge difference. Now, the system is more complicated than it was, and it has resulted in a few deaths. I think all of them on practice jumps. We had a tragic one up north where one of our second year guys, they were training early. It took them forever to figure out what happened. They went to altitude and had moisture on the canopy, and it froze and locked the opening sequence and killed him, Dave Liston. And then there's been a couple others, Mark Urban, Billy Martin. Seems like there's at least one other. I can't remember. Yeah.
Well, Rod, can you tell us a little bit about Russians and the development?
The only the Russians began using a sort of similar system, I think, prior to us. But I really don't know what that entails. Londo or the Loft guys would be able to explain that, but I'm not much of an expert on that. I did jump with a Russian guy all one summer, but that was completely on our system. It was a ton of fun. We just married up like one jumper on the list and just stayed together all summer. So that was a lot of fun. But I never really had him draw out their ram air system. So I really don't know too much about that. I overheard that we got the drogue capability from them. When you go out under a round canopy, you are attached with a static line to the ship, and that opens your round canopy, the package. When you go out under our ram air system, The same static line, it's identical, same static line, does not open the parachute. It opens a 4-foot drogue canopy that stabilizes your body as you're falling. You're still falling fast, but it stabilizes you, and you do a 5-second count. Jump 1,000, look 1,000, reach 1,000, wait 1,000, pull 1,000. Yeah.
I got something to add to that, Rod. That we had them also at West Yellowstone for a period of time, and I learned from them that they jump round in squares, or they were in the 90s, and that we had gotten ideas for our rounds from them, and that's how we developed our FS-12 parachute. And that it was about the steering slots, and they were a little bit more advanced than us at the time, so we were sharing technology.
They were jumping both rounds and squares at that time?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us about the early developments in the ram air parachutes. Is really important to the smoke jumpers in the United States. And I'm glad we had a chance to capture this. Thank you again.
Sure, you bet. My pleasure.
We're doing this for all of you. If you like what we're doing, please give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and leave a comment below. See you next time.